So continuing on, we're talking about how this is showing the extreme scale. This is video lecture number 3 for chapter 9. So if you haven't watched 1 and 2, please go back. So we've talked about how scale is a way of showing importance, and this is an 8-foot tall head from a 40-foot tall sculpture. So we're talking about really extremely large piece here, trying to talk about that idea of importance, right? This is just to show you an example of how big the hand is, for example. Definitely political propaganda going on here. A portrait of power to have something this big. It's made in marble and it's less realistic. If you see it, it's kind of got a simplified style to it. But we have getting some of the same feeling we had in some of the other ones with the hairstyle, clean shaven. It's definitely less idealized. We have classical antiquity going away here, like the idealized part of it. We're losing some of that Greek idealism and we're getting some of the Roman realism happening. We have a huge staring eyes going on here. They're really large and they're open, um, which maybe people have interpreted to be his position on Christianity for lots of different things. I'm not exactly convinced by any of them exactly. Maybe he looked like that. Anyway, nonetheless, this is very much a picture of power of Rome, a huge statue of an emperor who did a lot of power moves. We're talking about a giant statue. It's very much about power. Okay? Looking at the next piece, Young Flavian Woman, it's 25 inches, so about 2 feet, also marble. This is called a bust when you have the shoulders and head of someone like this is the front and the back of it. So we have a bust here. I didn't know if I had another picture. Sorry about that. A head without a body, a style taken from the Etruscans, not the Greeks. It's a portrait of an upper class woman, and this was very popular at this time, 90 BC. They had very elaborate hairstyles. You can see how elaborate it is, and it's becoming very stylized. Um, it has deep carving in it that creates a sense of light and dark shadow down inside of it. You can see that. There's very much a smooth delicacy in the skin, and this is getting very anatomically accurate, albeit maybe idealized version of beauty happening here. It's very delicate surface going on, and it's quite exquisitely carved. I mean, you have the details of the hair going on to the neck, all kinds of things happening. So their skill is in the way of their carving and their ability to sculpture is really, really high craftsmanship. And this kind of shows you the type of power people who had money would have to be able to commission someone to do this, upper class aristocracy. And this idea of capturing the likeness of someone for antiquity, um, from antiquity, someone who actually lived during a period of time, idealized version of them, but for their family to know what they looked like. This is kind of showing some of their values as well. This show out just shows you, we're going to switch a little bit into some architectural things here. And this shows you, I talked about the Seven Hills of Rome. We talked about Capitoline Wolf, which was this hill, Capitoline Hill, where they used to actually have a live wolf to hearken to that myth of Romulus and Remus. But I want to show you the kind of layout of the hills of Rome. And on these, because some of the places we're going to be looking at, Palatine, Capitoline Hill, they have some of these places. And I think it's important for you to notice that the Tiber River is right here. So people would say the origin of Rome was this island in the Tiber River as a defensible position. And so we can see how it grew up around the river for water supply and defense as well. Model of Rome here, you can kind of see Circus Maximus is on Palatine Hill, so that would be Palatine Hill here. Trajan's Forum is a small valley between Palatine Hill and Capitoline Hill, so going back, This area is where the Forum is that we're going to look at. Capitoline and Palatine Hill, very much in the center of important parts of Rome. And that is where the equestrian statue was located. D over here as well. So this is what we're talking about. And Trajan's forums in between them. This is Trajan's forum. Trajan was also an emperor that we'll talk about around 100 AD. He was considered to be, by some, to be the best emperor of Rome. He had one of the largest empires from the Atlantic Ocean to the Euphrates, which is down in the Near East. He was adopted by a previous emperor, so he was not a bloodline emperor. At certain points in the history of Rome, we see people being adopted as emperors. They're not blood related. Or we have, like we talked about with Constantine, someone becomes emperor from battle success later. This is an area that they made close to where they say the Romulus and Remus were found in a cave here in the mythology. And they had to actually clear hills and excavate it a bit to create the space. These are some artistic representations of it. We're going to look at some of these objects a bit later on, like the column and some of these arches as well, and talk a bit about them. Back there is the Colosseum and some of the different markets and things. You can see the equestrian statue right here. So, very, very, very important section of the city, and you have a lot of stuff happening here. A forum is an open space in the center of Roman cities used for civic, so governmental, economic, so marketplaces and different things like that, and political purposes. They were usually bound on three sides by a colonnade and a fourth by a basilica. So a colonnade being an area where they had columns, and then a basilica, which is a large roof building for commercial and legal type of things. It's an architectural model that you would get for later Christian churches and cathedrals, the basilica. But this in the middle of it is what we're going to look at, a column that is important, because this whole thing was a monument dedicated to his victory in the Dacian Wars, and later on it was renovated. This is an actual picture of how it looks now, so it's not in such good shape. Renovated by markets were added as markets of Trajan, places of business. There was a temple of Venus, Genetrix added, and then it was renovated into Caesar's Forum from Trajan's. Okay, so this is kind of how it actually looks today. Well, when the slide was taken. What we're going to look at is Trajan's column, which is in the middle of the forum. It's a hollow marble column from about 100 AD. That's it right there. The architect was Apollodorus of Damascus. So we're back in this age, just like Greece, where we know who did some of the work, because the individual achievements of people were important. This is very, very much like a lot of the work we're looking at in Rome, military propaganda. And on it we see it's located at the north end of the forum so that you can see it from quite a ways away. We see that it has a continuous narrative on it, moving around the entire column, like a scroll that's being undone. So it's a continuous relief inspired. So Trajan was victorious in the Dacian Wars. He was triumphal, and this is a narrative about that. His ashes were buried in the base, so it was very important to him. This continuous relief shows a lot of details of his military victory. Building projects being undertaken, walls, aqueducts, and roads. It would originally have been painted. It's in low relief or bas relief, where it's not really deeply cut. The form of relief, it still makes contact with the background, right? We've talked about this is connected to the substrate. And this slight amount of undercutting, this is undercutting where you have some amount of details and shadows like little caverns. around it. It gives it emphasis by casting shadow in the light, but overall it's more like a lighter impression. And depth is created through having less carving. So things that are further forward are deeper carved. They pop out further. This would kind of be in the way the planes of relief that you can see details of up on this. So the further back, closer to the substrate it gives, it's not as much carving. It means it's further back in space um, from the back as it pops out. So it's got a lot of detail on it. You can see when you look at how big it is. We're going into the very close up, but it's quite large. Originally, it would have had on top of it a statue of him, but it's no longer there. It's now a statue of St. Peter in bronze on top. The inspiration is a rolled and unrolled scroll, like I said to you. And so when we're looking at the detail, like this is the type of detail the whole thing has. And the planes of relief, they're designed, how everything's kind of broken up between scenes as it keeps unfolding. You have like detail of like the Romans army. They use this type of warfare with their shields that are locking people falling underfoot and getting all the way breaking into the walls and things. You see there's a lot of detail in this thing. There's a beheading of the Dacians, people who they defeated being beheaded. So we're getting a lot of sense of, what they did in their military victories. A lot of history happening here, what they would do, how they would fight. And then wounded Romans being pulled away. These are like their battle standards. We saw one of these with Augustus Suprema Porta with an eagle on top of it. So a lot of detail in like the armaments they would have, how they would construct their forts to be able to have places to stand their ground and actually win the war. And this is the statue on top of it now, St. Peter, because Rome has the Vatican close by. But it would have been, originally would have been the actual emperor himself on top. Okay. Looking at another piece of architecture, important one, Pont du Gard Aqueduct in France. So we're getting further out in the empire, away from Rome itself. This is in the south of France, and Romans were very innovative in architecture compared to some of the other art forms. These are made to carry water to Roman cities, homes, fountains, and baths, which is not just your own little individual bath inside your house, but an actual public pool area with a lot more to just a pool. They call them baths. It's made out of stone. It's 200 feet tall, and it's three-tiered, as you can see. It's located down here, close to Marseille. Three-tiered, and it has these barrel arches that get smaller as you go up. You can see you could actually walk across it. This is a scale. These are people on top of it. Overall total length changes in elevation. So as it goes across, it goes down so that the water would flow. It's created by a tunnel of barrel vaults. You can see as we get closer, those are kind of these arches. But up in here, this is how the water would flow. So that the gravity would make it feed in the channel. This is how you would create a tunnel, is what I was trying to say. These barrel arches, if you put them all in a row, you would create a tunnel this way. But you see how it's thicker at the bottom because you can actually go across it like a bridge. Pretty amazing. This is the channel inside. Okay, there were a lot of aqueducts in the empire. We're going to talk a bit more about this in the next video.